Carl, what have you done?
Think anyone will notice?
Mr. Carl Jackson, right?
Carl Jackson was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. After the sudden death of his mother at the age of 11, he moved between LA and Orlando, Florida, trying to find his way in life.
So I'm clearly a Carl Jackson fan.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Although he was introduced to hard work, faith, and family values, as a struggling teen, he wandered down the path of least resistance, finding himself jailed twice. By the grace of God, he attended an evangelical church and found that there was a better way and accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior.
There's just no fake stuff about Carl Jackson.
Now, on the Salem Podcast Network, Carl has launched on a journey to help people of all races and backgrounds to discover facts of America's true past, as well as realize the benefits of utilizing their God-given gifts and talents, which far outweigh any benefit from a government subsidy or program.
It's dangerous out here. Let's roll, Carl.
Get going fast!
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Hey, welcome to today's edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Thank you for joining me today. A couple of things that I want to talk to. Actually, I'm going to go into a deep dive shortly on, I'm going to ask you a question. Does the use of the N-word justify murder? We'll get into that today, but first, let me give you what's happening in the news today. Public wants more support for Ukraine. This, according to a Pew Research poll. We'll go over that and get into some numbers as far as that is concerned. San Francisco is now boycotting 28 states. Can you believe that? They must not realize that the rest of America is boycotting San Francisco. They say those states aren't woken up for the leadership of San Francisco, basically. I'm paraphrasing. And they demand that you support all abortion, transgender, and all of their ideologies that has made San Francisco. So that is one bit of news. The Senate votes yes to a resolution to overturn traveling mask mandates. This has not gone through the House as of yet, but I suspect that mass theater is coming to an end. This, according to Breitbart, mass theater is ending. British Airways, also Virgin Atlantic, are the first to drop the mask mandate. So sooner or later, these liberals or leftists are going to be forced to deal with reality. COVID, as we know it as a pandemic, is over. It is endemic. It is here to stay. This is something we're going to have to be treated for annually. It's time to move on from this. The left wants to continue to use this as a political cudgel, but it's not going to work much longer. I do believe a couple of other things that are happening in the news that I want to mention. California governor resists a call to suspend the gas tax there. So stop blaming the oil companies. Another thing that I think is a good thing. I personally like this. Maybe one thing that Democrats get right, the Senate passes a bill to make daylight savings time permanent. Frankly, I can't stand going back and forth when it comes to daylight savings time, even though I like the current time frame that we're in. Even though you lose an hour initially, I love the fact that you gain an hour or so in the evening. It's just, to me, it's just better. You get to enjoy your, your work, your day, whatever, and then come back in the evenings. There's still daylight left. I like that personally. So hopefully, hopefully this is where it'll stay. That's one thing. That's one thing that I like, quite frankly. So if they do it, good. I think this needs to end. There's a poll that the vast majority of Americans oppose cancel culture. 77% view canceling as harmful to American society. And that's from the Daily Caller. I'm not sure how much I believe some of those polls, even though Daily Caller is totally reputable. But I think a lot of people that take those polls will sometimes want to cancel other people out. So we'll see. Big news today as well. President Vladimir Zelensky is going to speak in front of, via video, of course, is going to speak in front of Congress today. And he's going to ask for more help help, essentially. Our American leadership is leading from behind. They do want to manage the decline of the United States of America, but they are totally inept and incompetent of doing that. And I've mentioned that before. So we're in a total free fall. But Joe Biden looks so weak. He looks so feckless on the world stage that they have to start leading from behind. And perhaps this Pew poll that I want to just get into briefly will begin to push Joe Biden to help out Ukraine. Now, again, I think Sebastian Gorka said it best. There are several things that he recommends. One is obvious to all of us, and we should have been crushing Putin's oil. We shouldn't be getting any oil from Russia. The ban on Russian oil should have happened far sooner than it did. But we also need to open up the spigots right here in the United States of America and make sure that we deregulate. So these oil companies, Jen Psaki lying, we talked about that yesterday, 9,000 oil leases that are available that these companies won't drill on. Well, it's so much harder than that. First off, they have to buy equipment. They have, the pipes and all that kind of stuff. They have to make sure that the land is viable. They have to combat the greenies, the radical environmentalist commies. They have to combat them. The process could take nearly a year just to be able to drill on one of those sites. So a lot of deregulation has to occur. The Biden administration is simply lying, not to mention all types of court hearings and hoops that the oil companies will have to go through. It's just the Biden administration is lying. Well, on this issue of Ukraine, they're leading from behind. But as I told you, all right, so oil is the first thing. Also, we can be providing intelligence. Sebastian Gorka mentioned this. I think that's great. We can obviously provide intelligence to the Ukrainians. We can also provide munitions. Ammunition or weaponry to Ukraine. I know there's a lot of back and forth to whether we should send planes there. I'm not one that believes that we should be that we should send our U.S. air pilots to fly over Ukraine and enforce this no-fly zone, which means Ukrainians can't fly, Russians can't fly. American planes would shoot Russian planes out of the sky. A lot of people are concerned about World War III. I think that's a viable argument. I think that we're fighting a different type of war, to be honest with you. I don't think it's that simple. I think there's more nuance to this. I think what you see, China engaging Saudi Arabia as far as them, becoming partners or likely becoming partners when you're dealing with China buying oil from Saudi Arabia, devaluing the dollar potentially. I think this is the new Cold War that we're in. Where China is going to try to take us down, try to devalue the dollar. Russia's going to try to do the same. The East is working against the West, and the West has been caught with their pants down while these global elitists have been trying to absolutely destroy us and crush the middle class, not just here in the United States, but even in other Western nations and across Europe. It looks like they've been caught with their pants down. They didn't anticipate a madman by the name, and not a madman. I don't think he's a madman. I think he's evil. I think he's a despot. But I just think Vladimir Putin is evil. I think this is a man that has to be stopped. And I think you could do two things. I think the metrosexuals and the World Economic Forum are evil and they have to be dealt with. But I also think Vladimir Putin is an evil person and he has to be dealt with. If he gets a bullet in his head, I frankly don't care. I think that would be a good thing. And I think the world would be better off without him, quite frankly. So I think that we can address two issues: the metrosexuals of the WEF, the fecklessness of NATO, which is now trying to step up. They're doing more than Joe Biden is, that's for sure. And also we can address the issue with Russia. I think they're two separate issues. But these leaders are both evil. World Economic Forum, NATO, in my opinion, is just weak. I think that's different from the World Economic Forum. I think the people associated with the World Economic Forum, these global elitists that want to control all of us, I think these people are sick. I think these people are evil. I think these people are bored. They have nothing else to do with their money, and they have no meaning or purpose in life. So they're deriving or their meaning in life out of trying to control you. It's sick, it's crazy, and it's evil, quite frankly. But again, those are some of the things that we could do to help Ukraine. I think short of starting a quote World War III again, even though I believe we are in a Cold War. All right. So now, the public expresses mixed views of the U.S.'s response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 35% favor U.S. military action, even if it risks nuclear conflict with Russia. Okay, now I think that's a little cray-cray. I don't think people really think this through. Americans and some of us on the West, I don't think, at least for quite some time, we've really had to experience what it means to go to war, where things can get really hard for us here stateside. I think Iraq and Afghanistan, I think those are totally different. We could have dominated those wars quickly. Instead, we chose to sit around forever when there was no need to, in my opinion. I do agree with Bagram Air Force Base. I think that was a very strategic place. I mean, located not too far. We could watch what was going on with China, Iran, Russia, all of these places. So I think that was a very strategic location. It's a shame that Biden let that go, along with about $85 billion worth of equipment that he helped arm the Taliban with. And the Taliban sent some of that equipment to China, likely reverse engineering it and probably using it against our troops one day. So this is the fecklessness of the Biden administration. But this poll goes on to say, 3 weeks into Russia's military invasion of Ukraine, nearly half of Americans, 47%, approve of the Biden administration's handling of the Russian invasion. What? While about 4 in 10, 39% disapprove, 13% say they are not sure. That means they're waiting on the media to tell them what to think. Roughly a third of Americans, 32%, say that the United States is providing about the right amount of support to Ukraine as its fight to hold off the Russian invasion. A larger share, 42%, say the U.S. should be providing more support to Ukraine, while just 7% say it is providing too much support. About 1 in 5, 19%, say they are simply not sure. And part of the support that we should have provided to Ukraine, besides munitions, besides drilling right here in the United States of America and banning Russian oil, providing Ukrainians information so that they could go and fight the Russians on their own. Intelligence is the word that I was looking for, not information. Part of the problem we have too is just you cannot get past the fact that we have an extremely weak leader in Joe Biden. One of the things that you have to do in foreign policy involves, whether you like it or not, is rhetoric. It's talking strong. It's having a good, being able to communicate, and you want the world to perceive that you should be feared. You're not going to mess around. You're not going to play when it comes to foreign policy. The world saw that in President Donald J. Trump. They don't see that in Biden, and that's why the world is on the move. That's why Iran. I saw a headline from something James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation. He sent as well. North Korea missile test. This is breaking that the North Korea had a failed missile test, likely of the massive Hwasong 17 ICBM intercontinental ballistic missile. That's scary. That was paraded in October 2020. Initial reports indicate the missile failed and exploded shortly after launch, and debris fell in or near Pyongyang. So, I mean, the world is becoming a scary place when you have a feckless leader. It tells you how much America was actually respected and revered pre Joe Biden administration. And now the dictators are going mad. They're going crazy. They're jockeying for position. You can thank Joe Biden for that, and you can thank Joe Biden's voters for that. Frankly, I appreciate all the Biden voters that have awakened, if you will, and are no longer going to be voting, hopefully not just for Joe Biden, but for the Democratic Party. As you see, their policies have gone extremely far to the left, completely insane. But this is what we get. We're not respected on the world stage. It's the complete opposite. It's the complete opposite. And now many more people will die as a result of a weak, feckless, senile old man that's in the White House that some of you voted for. And it's okay. You can repent, make it up in 2022. But please understand the ramifications of voting for the Democratic Party, whose ideology are so far to the left and just so dangerous now. And we see this not just to the United States of America, but to the world. Now, having said that, let's get back to the United States of America, because I want to go into a deep dive about the question of whether or not does the N-word justify murder. All right, so does the N-word justify murder? Carl, what are you talking about? Listen, I felt like I needed to talk about this because no one else is. And although it is very important for us to pay attention to what's happening with Ukraine and continue to pray for the Ukrainian people and honestly the Russian people that don't want to be involved. Remember that protester that popped up in the newsroom holding her little sign saying no to war. She disappeared for a couple of days. Apparently, she was jailed, questioned, all this stuff for a couple of days, not allowed to sleep. Not a great experience for her. And things could get worse for her, but it took real courage for her to do that. But bringing it back stateside, I really want to dive into this question. I think it's really important. Does the N-word justify murder? Now, let me ask you a question. I want to be very frank. This is what you're going to get on the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I want you, and now you're in the comfort of your own home or car or wherever you may be listening to this podcast. So I just want you to be honest. No one's going to call you a racist. No one knows what you're thinking. That's the cool thing about this podcast, right? So let's be real. Would you feel safer walking at night in the middle of the hood or a community dominated or that's predominantly Black, Latino, somewhere in a blue city? All right. I know the left will call you racist, but the truth of the matter is they feel the same. They feel just like you do. I'll say it out loud. You would feel a little nervous. Let's be honest. Compared to walking in an area that's rural or a suburb where there's more whites and upper class or upper middle class, Latinos, Asians, some blacks, you'd feel safer in neighborhoods like that. It's okay. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're a racist. It means you have common sense. And it's because you could read data. It's because you watch the news or you pay attention to the news. It's because you understand that when you abandon God's plan for family, like sadly my community, the Black community largely has, there's ramifications for that. Single mothers are great. Moms are great. But let's face it, when dads are not in the home, it's a lot tougher raising children. It's as simple as that. Children need a balance. Women can be very strong, but they can't be men. They can't be men. And children want to look up to their father. So when you don't have that father figure in the home or a male mentor around that child can look up to, a child struggles. A child may get involved in crime too, yearning for some type of approval from God knows who. It's very important that you understand that. And sadly, what we're seeing is the use of this N-word, the use of this lie that America's systemically racist. I think it's having severe ramifications, and I want you to be aware of it, and I want you to be careful about what's going on. So does the N-word justify murder? And then I'm going to get to some very specific cases. I'm going to talk to you about this serial killer, this DC and New York serial killer. By the way, this is very important. All of these killers that I'm getting ready to mention happen to be black. But they're not getting the press they deserve, and I think that's exactly because they are black. And so I want to talk about that because I think this is dangerous for society as a whole. I think it's dangerous for black people, for black communities, for all communities, quite frankly. All right, so does a slur or does the N-word, hat tip to American Greatness, a columnist there by the name of Paul Bradford, stoked this idea in my mind, if you will. And he, very thought-provoking column that he wrote. And I just want to expound on that and add to it. So I'm calling it, his column was titled, Does a Slur Justify Murder? And I'm just going to call it, Does the N-word Justify Murder? Now, don't say the N-word. I do think that's a dirty word. I don't care if whites use it. I don't care if blacks use it. It's one word that I just cannot stand. I can't tolerate. When I was a young little wannabe thug, I would go around, hey, N-word, and I just used it flippantly because it was just the thing to do. It didn't matter if I was talking to blacks. It didn't matter if I was talking to Mexicans. The same thing, Mexicans talking to me growing up in L.A. Hey, N-word, this and that. They didn't mean anything by it. That was just the way that we spoke. Now, sometimes some did. I always tell people the most racism that I ever experienced was right in L.A., and that was dealing with different, Mexicans calling you the N-word when they really did mean it, because I grew up in an area that was, had a lot of gang activity, black gangs, Mexican gangs, and so you would hear that word when they really meant it. All right. It's crazy, but that's the truth of the matter. No one wants to tell that dirty little secret. But I want to talk to you about this story. This happened right here in the state of Florida. This gentleman by the name of Corey Pujos, who happens to be a Dunkin' Donut manager or was, punched a 77-year-old man by the name of Vanell Cook, who happened to be white. This occurred allegedly after Corey Pujos was called the N-word. And I'll just give you the summary here. A black man was sentenced to house arrest last week for killing an elderly white man. Corey Pujos pleaded guilty to felony battery over the incident that occurred last year at a Florida Dunkin' Donuts. Vanell Cook, again, 77-year-old white man, got upset with the service at the store and yelled at the staff. Pujos asked Cook to leave, allegedly. I haven't read the report. The white man allegedly called the black employee the N-word. All right. So the 77-year-old Vanell Cook was belligerent. The manager of Dunkin' Donuts asked the guy to leave. That's the right thing to do. All right. That's the right thing to do. The white man allegedly called the black employee the N-word. I wasn't there. I didn't hear it, but these are the allegations. As a result of that, Pujos then made a very stupid decision. After that, Pujos asked Cook to repeat it. What Pujos should have done at that time was call the police. All right, and that's another thing. This is another reason why I hate police in America systemically racist, because you're put in this position where you think the world is against you and you don't have an advocate if you're black. And that's silly, and that's nonsense, and that puts you in a situation like this, whereas Pujos should have said, okay, if it is indeed true, and I don't know, and you don't, honestly, this is the one thing you learn about going through the criminal justice system. You don't know what's true or what's not. Everybody sounds like a great witness until they're cross-examined. God's honest truth. I mean, so sometimes I just don't know what to believe, even inside of police reports. Unless there's a video, eyewitness testimony isn't as credible as you'd like to think. Sometimes it is if it's extremely fresh, but it's not always reliable. Lie detector tests are an absolute joke. People could just get nervous and test wrong where those are concerned. Those are extremely unreliable. I know some law enforcement will say otherwise. They're unreliable. You get somebody nervous right from the bat, unless they're just stone cold. Those things are unreliable. So anyway, Pujos asked Cook to repeat it, which was a very dumb decision on his part. Allegedly, Cook did. Pujos punched the guy. Pujols punched him. Now I don't know how old Pujols is, but he's somewhat of a young man. I do know that. He punched the guy. The guy falls to the floor. He hits his head. He's transported to the hospital, where he later dies of his injuries. Now, so as a result of that, that is manslaughter. As a result of that, Pujols was charged with aggravated manslaughter initially. He took a plea deal. He pled out guilty to the lesser charge of felony battery. Now, I'm sorry, that's just insane. And I feel sorry for this guy, Pujols, but he made a very stupid decision. And as a result of his very stupid decision, he ended a man's life. That isn't felony battery. That was manslaughter, as bad as it is. And let me tell you something. I know some of you out there may not be able to understand the pain that the N-word brings when someone calls you that. That's why I don't play around, even when rappers say I'm using instead of ER at the end. The dumbest argument ever. It's the same word. It's just silly. If we're offended as a black community by other people calling us the N-word, we should have the decency and the respect for ourselves not to say it and then make excuses for it, like at the end. I used to make excuses for it. One day, God convicted me and it hit me that people like Martin Luther King Jr., people that fought for civil rights legitimately, not like these race hustlers today, like Big Perm Al Sharpton or the Reverend Jesse Jackson. These people fought and died so that they didn't have to hear that word, so that they did have equal seating at the kitchen table, if you will. And so I don't think God convicted me. We don't have a right to use that word. We shouldn't be using it. It's just evil. It's just evil. It's as simple as that. The judge's full sentence imposed 2 years house arrest for Corey Pujols, 200 hours of community service, and an anger management course on the perpetrator. The prosecutor's office was satisfied with the result. Here's what the state attorney said. Two of the primary factors were the aggressive approach the victim took toward the defendant and everyone working with the defendant, and that the victim repeatedly used possibly the most aggressive and offensive term in the English language. Now, aggressive, I don't know why you would use that word except that you want to make an excuse for letting this guy get a lesser charge. Now, it is important to understand Corey Pujols had no prior record. So that always goes into account. But when you kill somebody, that is a different thing. That is a different thing. If it's accidental, that's one thing. And I know arguments could be made that it's accidental. The problem is he asked the guy to repeat it so that he could punch him. He wanted to at that point. He did the right thing by asking him to leave. The guy didn't leave, remained belligerent, allegedly uses the N-word again, gets punched, falls to the floor, dies. Insane. Here's what the Hillsborough state attorney had to say. His name is Andrew Warren, by the way. So he said that the sentence holds the defendant accountable while considering the totality of the circumstances, the aggressive approach, and despicable racial slur used by the victim, along with the defendant's age, his lack of criminal record, and lack of intent to cause the victim's death. Well, obviously, he didn't intend to cause the victim's death. The problem is he did, and he invited it to happen by asking the guy to stay. Now, I don't want to see this guy locked up for the rest of his life because, obviously, this is not what he intended. But this is just a huge mistake. And for the state attorney to even mention the fact that the word was an issue, I'm sorry. It's insane. I hear conservatives buy into this too, this notion, just a quick tangent on hate crimes. I think the use of the term hate crimes and implementing that and using that idea, that concept in our justice system is silly, and I think it's stupid, and I think it's dangerous. I don't think a person should be charged with a hate crime because they're white and they attack a black, or they're black and they attack a white, or they're Jew and this. Here's how you bring equality into the system. And I understand many people disagree with me, but it's okay. You can be wrong. If evil is evil, if the law is the law, punish people for breaking the law. That's it. Punish people for breaking the law. If a white KKK member, Democratic KKK, by the way, if a white Democratic KKK member assaults a black man, kills a black man, or so on, etc., make him pay the full consequences of that, of breaking that law, so that he sees he's not superior. I know you want to beat him up and make him feel guilty, try to change his heart. That's not up to us. That's up to God. We make this stuff so much more complicated than it has to be, and I think that it has deleterious effects on society. So now everybody's, hate crime, hate crime, hate crime. I just think it's silly. I know plenty of conservatives will disagree with me. I don't care. I just think they're wrong on that issue. So think about this. What if the roles were reversed? What if the punch that resulted in the victim's death, what if it was a white guy punching a black guy? What if it was a white younger man punching a 77-year-old man? Maybe he used the word cracker or something like that. I don't know. I don't even know a dirty racial slur that whites would be so offended to be called, to be honest with you. And I frankly don't care. But imagine if the roles were reversed. We'd see a totally different story. Totally different story. This story would be plastered all across the media. All across the media. So again, I don't think Cook or Pujols, I'm sorry, intended to kill Cook, but he did. And he doesn't have a record, so I don't think he should feel the ramifications or the full extent of the law. I don't think he should serve the rest of his life in prison, but I do believe that he should have went to jail and not just had house arrest. And I do believe that it should have been, I don't know how much time, but I certainly think he should have spent more time in jail than he is spending on house arrest. I don't know. But I don't think he should have spent forever in there. Enough time to think about the ramifications of what he did. Essentially, he killed a man. It's as simple as that. And he invited it because he let his emotions get the best of him. Now, I got to say, in that situation, someone calls me the N-word, I'm going to get heated. I'm going to want to punch that guy in the face. But 77 years old, I know that I can do damage. I know that if I hit this guy hard enough, I'm thinking this stuff. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to call the cops. The guy, at that point, the manager asked him to leave. Ask the gentleman to leave. I believe it's trespassing at that point. The guy is still belligerent. Call the cops. Have this guy arrested. But this is, again, another thing. This defund the police movement. All cops are racist. America is systemically racist. Blacks may feel, and Cook may have felt like, hey, I'm not going to get justice here. These are the ramifications of this lie that America is systemically racist. It's insane. When it comes to black unarmed men being shot, I hate the term unarmed because unarmed doesn't mean dangerous. What if you know martial arts? What if you're just used to street fighting? What if you're stronger than a police officer that's trying to take you down, and so on, etc.? By the way, everybody talks about George Floyd. They never talk about Tony Timpa, a white man that died the same way that George Floyd did. He was actually held underneath the knee of a police officer longer than George Floyd even. And no one talks about that. That's not racist. But George Floyd, this guy who, and listen, I know the parents and the family was hurting over George Floyd, but George Floyd is no hero. And I'm tired of black thugs being treated like black heroes. They simply are not. This was a guy, George Floyd, that was a menace to society. So if you're going to talk about George Floyd, talk about Tony Timpa. No one is doing that. Anyway, the left always claims that, one, the justice system disproportionately punishes blacks while whites get off easy. If that's the case, I want you to consider Kim Potter. You got former officer Kim Potter. Former officer Kim Potter is now spending 2 years in prison as a result of accidentally shooting Dante Wright. Now, I got to be honest with you, and I'm going to make some people mad. And again, I'm just going to say it out loud. I know some of you may be afraid to say it, but the truth of the matter is, I feel sorry for Dante Wright's parents. I feel bad for Dante Wright even though, he's dead and gone. I feel bad for them. The problem is Dante Wright escalated the situation himself. He was pulled over, apparently for some type of traffic violation. The kid had warrants. He decided to run. A police officer had his body extended into the vehicle, trying to pull him off. Officer Kim Potter, who had trained police officers for whatever reason, perhaps she hadn't been involved in a situation like that. It's so different. It's funny to me. People say this all the time, or you hear this all the time. People don't say it to me per se, but you hear it all the time. Well, she trained. I'm sorry. This is another reason, call me a sexist. I don't want women being police officers. It's very dangerous. It's the same reason I don't want women being drafted into the military to serve in infantry or so. It's such a dangerous job. You're going to come in contact with men that are 9.9 times out of 10 much stronger than you, and sometimes your only defense will be to use a firearm when perhaps a male police officer might not have to. These are the realities of being a man and a woman. Whether you like it or not, I'm just going to tell you the truth. So Kim Potter gets 2 years in jail, in prison, for shooting Dante Wright. I think because he was trying to escape, because he had already endangered one police officer, she had the right to shoot him. And I believe that should have been her defense. This was a criminal trying to evade arrest. He took off. It was an accident, but I did have the right to shoot him. And they argued that somewhat, but it just, in my opinion, it wasn't strong enough. But Kim Potter shouldn't be sitting in jail. Kim Potter should be out, and she should get her retirement soon. This lady had a stellar record for, I think it was nearly 30 years or over 25 years, somewhere in between that. But that was unintentional. That was unintentional. So she goes to 2 years. She gets 2 years in prison. This guy gets 2 years house arrest. Stellar record protecting the community for over 20 years. Kim Potter, she's sitting in jail. She was a cop. Dangerous situation. Pujols, frustrating situation. Annoyed situation. Angry situation. Not a dangerous situation. Big difference. Big difference. All right, now, there is more leniency in the justice system toward black criminals. I know you don't believe that. Especially if they can offer evidence by racism. Let me offer this. Let me offer this really quick. There was another man that used the N-word defense in Florida. His name was Johnny Dunley. Now, Johnny Dunley beat his math tutor to death. His math tutor, David Grant. Where they allegedly had an argument where David Grant, the victim, used the N-word, supposedly. Nobody there to witness it, but that was the defense. So even though Dunley admitted to the murder, beating this guy senseless, beating this guy to death, the prosecutors eventually dropped the case over the N-word defense. And then the Broward County State Attorney, I need to look up who this person is, probably a social justice warrior put in by Soros. Sounds crazy conspiracy theory, but that's true right here in Orlando. This guy, George Soros, put in two. Aramis Ayala, and then he funded the campaign of Monique Worrell right here in Orlando, Florida, where we're seeing a spike in crime because these social justice warriors are letting people out of jail and or prison that shouldn't be. So the state has no competent, this is according to the Broward County State Attorney, the state has no competent evidence to rebut the argument that when Dunley is called a N-word, he was suddenly provoked to turn and strike Mr. Grant. So I guess it's like an insanity plea. The guy hears the N-word, he gets provoked, and so now he's given license to kill. Totally asinine, totally insane. And then recall do you guys remember the black female hostess happened to be Asian? That was assaulted at a New York City restaurant during the pandemic. What happened, if I recall the story correctly, was these black women came to a restaurant. This Asian hostess asked for their vaccine card. Now, either their boyfriends or husbands were already there or were coming to meet them later. I believe they were already there. And so the women were coming to meet them, if I recall the story correctly. This hostess asked for a vaccine card, vaccine card, because that's what was required in the crazy communist state of New York. All right. These ladies get belligerent. I don't think they have their vaccine cards, and they beat the hostess up, and then they claim the hostess called her the N-word. All right, I don't believe that for a second. But here's the problem. Black defendants now know that we live in this social justice environment, this Uncle BLM, Black Lives Matter environment, where all you have to say is racism, 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 and you get these white leftists and honestly, even some conservatives that don't want to be called racist, so they just let it fly. You cannot do that. We need equal protection under the law and equal justice under the law. Doesn't matter. I don't give a damn about the color of your skin. What matters is whether or not you broke the law or whether or not you did it. That's how you bring equality to the system. So these ladies lied. I don't think it paid off for them, but they lied. She called us the N-word. The Asian hostess called them the N-word. So this little Asian hostess called 3 big black women the N-word. Give me a freaking break. Let's use common sense. Not only are they so politically correct in New York, it's insane, but no little Asian lady is going to sit there with 3 big black irate women and call them the N-word, knowing she would get her butt beat. Knowing. It's insane. Then let me take you to Omar Thornton. The N-word defense has also been used to justify a mass shooting. That's right. Omar Thornton, you've heard of him? No, I hadn't either. So he shot up a Connecticut distillery. This was in 2010. He killed 9 people, including himself. So murder-suicide, all right? His family claimed he was pushed to violence by the racist work environment at the distillery where he worked. And then this claim was sympathetically treated by the media. What is the problem with that narrative? No, it turns out that Thornton chose to commit the mass murder because he was laid off for stealing beer kegs. So I guess they fired him because he was black. Or did they fire him because he was stealing beer kegs from his employer? Come on now. Then there's Devin Dunham. He didn't even have to prove his victim was racist. So Devin Dunham was found not guilty. This was last May for a 2017 murder, which he shot to death a 77-year-old white man. Dunham claimed the victim startled him as he approached the elderly man's vehicle. That defense somehow convinced the jury. I'd like to know who was in the jury. And then there's Jaleel Stallings. Jaleel Stallings was exonerated last September for shooting at police during the George Floyd riots in Minneapolis. So Jaleel Stallings shooting at police during the George Floyd riots. Stallings claimed he was acting in self-defense when he fired. What is self-defense? I'm black and they're cops? I mean, seriously. This is how insane this stuff has gotten. He fired at officers in an armored police vehicle. He argued he didn't know they were cops in an armored police vehicle. He didn't know they were cops. This argument, plus the police's use of force against him during his arrest, convinced the jury to find him not guilty. So this guy is going to go out and terrorize, I guarantee you, black neighborhoods wherever he is. And thank you, jury, for doing that. Hopefully one of you guys get attacked, not badly, but just enough where you learn your lesson. I shouldn't say that out loud. Anyway. All right. And then there's Deontay Rizals. He was set to receive a reduced manslaughter charge in December for a brutal home invasion murder, even though the jury was convinced Rizals viciously stabbed Jill Halliburton Sue to death. They felt it was wrong to send a young black man to jail for life. They were right. They shouldn't have sent him to jail for life. They should have sent him to the electric chair or to the gas chamber. I'm sorry. Before a firing squad. So vocal jurors pushed for him to be found guilty on a lesser charge because he was black. Fortunately, the jury forewoman stood up and decided at the last moment it was wrong to give Rizals the light treatment. Contrary to popular belief, our system has grown to favor blacks because of the social justice mentality that now exists. You wouldn't know that hearing the narrative, but we talked to you, or I spoke earlier about unarmed black man being shot, or talked about Tony Tempa a little bit, but the truth of the matter is unarmed, quote unquote, white men are shot at twice the rate as black men, but that doesn't fit the media narrative, so you will not hear that. You have, 600, 700,000 cops. They make millions of stops per year, typically with criminals or with someone who's breaking the law. They don't know what's going to happen, and they have very dangerous jobs, and it's something that we have to be mindful of. Yet, in all of that, the latest numbers were 2019, 9 unarmed black men killed. Millions of stops, 9 unarmed black men killed. Double the amount of whites killed. That's pretty freaking good. The reason why we can look at cases like George Floyd on TV and get all hyped up about the one case is because they are so freaking rare. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. Dante Wright, it's unbelievable. And then they happen twice as much to white men. But we're not going to throw those on the media because, God forbid, if we put those stories in the media, if we tell the Corey Pujols stories and all that kind of stuff, God forbid we do that, people may actually come to the conclusion that, maybe cops aren't racist. Then let me talk to you about a serial killer real quick, and also a man named Gene McKean, and also Darrell Brooks. You may have forgotten about him. So Darrell Brooks is the Waukesha murderer, mass murderer, allegedly. I'll say that just to be on the safe side. All right. So Yahoo News had tip. Judge sets October trial for man in Wisconsin parade deaths. A judge set an October trial date Friday for a man accused of killing 6 people and injuring dozens of others by driving his SUV into a Christmas parade in suburban Milwaukee last year. You guys remember that? Right before Christmas. This guy, a black guy, decides to run his SUV through a crowd of paraders, killing 6 and injuring dozens of others. Now, you're telling me that this lie, that this narrative, that America is systemically racist doesn't have deadly consequences? Of course it does. When you teach thugs, I don't care if they're thugs, I don't care if they're crazy, if they start believing, these low IQ people that are dangerous criminals, they start believing this narrative that the world is out to get them, that the white man is out to get them, that they don't stand a shot in this world because white people are evil. What do you think they're going to do? It's insane. So this judge sets an October trial date. Darrell Brooks Jr. I know people don't like saying the name. I get that. A lot of people believe that you're going to encourage others to commit the same crimes. Not if you enforce the law. That's the problem. Enforce the freaking law. Somebody like this runs over and kills 6 people, and then dozens of others are killed. You know what you should do? You know what the televised special of the week should be? Have him stand up in the middle of the road and run him over with a car. Put that on TV. I know that sounds crazy, but if people saw that there were consequences to breaking the law, especially murder, I have a feeling that murder would decrease. And I think pretty drastically, quite frankly. All right. So the Waukesha County Circuit Judge Jennifer Darrow scheduled Brooks' trial to begin October 3rd and run through October 28th. Prosecutors told her they would likely need 5 to 7 days to present their case. Brooks' attorney said they didn't know how much time they would need. Darrow acknowledged, the judge, during the hearing that she knows the father of one of the people who were killed. She said her family has hired him in the past to perform legal work for them. He donated $500 to her judicial campaign, and she offered him her condolences after the parade via text messages. She said she hasn't interacted with him since those texts and pledged to officiate the case impartially. I think the judge should go ahead and step down. The media will use this. Darrow also, but I don't think there should be a change of venue. He killed his peers in that community. Let his peers be his judge. Sometimes I do think there's situations where there's no way you're going to get a fair trial. I don't know. Let me think on that. All right. So Darrell also ordered both sides to begin drafting a survey to mail to prospective jurors in Waukesha County to gauge whether an impartial jury can be selected in the county. The judge made the move after Brooks' attorney filed a motion last month seeking to move the trial out of Waukesha County, or make sure you don't move that trial to Minneapolis. The guy walked scot-free. Or pull jurors from another county because publicity about Brooks has been so pervasive and negative. What publicity? What publicity? Maybe there's some locally that I'm unaware of, but the media has done everything possible to wipe this mass murderer under the rug, to keep quiet. God forbid you promote the narrative that some black men are extremely dangerous to the point of murder. Then you have this DC and New York serial killer. You heard about him, happens to be black as well. The intense manhunt to find the man suspected of shooting 5 homeless men, 2 fatally, has been identified. And I am here to announce this according to the Washington, D.C. Metro Police Department Chief Robert Conti. He said he was there to announce that we got our man, quote unquote. He went on to say at approximately 2:30 a.m., a 30-year-old Gerard Brevard of Southeast D.C. was taken into custody. The press conference came hours after the D.C. police announced on social media that they had arrested a man believed to have shot 5 homeless men in D.C. and New York City. This is another thing. You have some of these people that may be mentally deranged out there. I don't know if this man was legitimately mentally deranged. According to his dad, he was, and the court system could have done a lot more with his son, and they chose not to. But you can bet your bottom dollar that the media is not going to want to talk about this killer much because he happens to be a black serial killer. Just like they don't talk about Kermit Gosnell, the worst mass murderer of all, in his abortion clinics. Treated black women, and he was black, and he is black, treated black women differently than he treated white upper class women in a cleaner clinic, but treated the black women like complete and utter crap. Baby pieces and parts all around his facility. It's insane. It's insane. All to promote a narrative that isn't true. America is systemically racist. So this guy goes around killing homeless people, happens to be black, kills 2, 3 are severely injured. Totally sad. But this is the case. During the press conference on Tuesday, Conti said that Brevard had a previous criminal history with charges in D.C. in 2016 and 2018. Following the most recent arrest on Tuesday, Brevard was charged with first-degree murder, assault with a dangerous weapon, and assault with intent to kill. According to the AP, in 2018, Brevard was arrested in D.C. and pleaded guilty to attempted assault with a deadly weapon. Court records of... So why was he on the streets? At first I was going to say the father is just making excuses for him, but the father is probably right in this case. This guy had a previous record, deadly weapons, and he's out on the street. Court records obtained by the AP showed that Brevard was sent to a psychiatric hospital after he was found to be mentally unstable. In 2009, he was deemed fit to stand trial and pleaded guilty to the charges, resulting in a year in prison. So perhaps it should have been longer. But this is a problem. There are some issues with mental illness. But again, this goes back to there's a black serial killer, and the left doesn't want to report it because it's a black guy. Then there's Gene McKean. You guys haven't heard much about Gene McKean. Gene McKean, every year I attend the Supercross. I like dirt bikes, so I attend the Supercross event in Daytona Beach down the way here. And, it's bike week, so you see a lot of guys and gals out riding cool. I mean, some of the tightest bikes, Harley Davidsons that are, souped up and modified. Choppers, crotch rockets, it doesn't matter. You see some of the coolest bikes in the world in Daytona Beach every year for Bike Week. But I go to attend the Supercross event, my family and I, and a buddy of mine and his family. We go every year and just enjoy it. You know, have just a fun time watching the races, afterwards sitting and talking a little bit, waiting for it takes forever to get out of Daytona International Speedway. So we typically will talk in the parking lot or until the traffic cools down. But, you know, down the road and perhaps a couple or so hours later, there were a couple that was being murdered. That's right. Daytona Beach, Florida. They finally arrested the man that was accused of stabbing and killing a Florida couple who were headed home from Bike Week in Daytona Beach earlier in the month. Now, they were headed home on their bicycles. Apparently, they had gone out perhaps for a bite to eat, get a couple of drinks. They wanted to be responsible. They didn't take motorcycles. They didn't take a vehicle. They just rode their bikes. It's 2 a.m. Bike Week. There's still people out, you know, perhaps not deep. Most people are probably sleeping, but still people out and about. The town is crowded during Bike Week. And then there's 32-year-old Gene Robert McKean, who attacked and killed, allegedly, Terry Altman, who was 48 years old, and his wife, Brenda Altman, who was 55 years old. These people were stabbed to death for no reason. Gene McKean, black. These two are white. Not only were they stabbed to death, their throats were slit. Their bodies left on the side of the road. You're not hearing much about this because Gene McKean happens to be black. Now, apparently, there's some mental illness. I don't know that there's evidence of that. I've just heard that reported. I've not seen the evidence of that. But having said that, he's black, so it's not going to get a lot of press. It's going to get some local news, some conservative outlets are going to talk about it, but it's going to slip underneath the radar. I guarantee you. One of the most heinous crimes, I'm sure, in Daytona Beach. One of the officers on scene said it's the worst scene that he's ever seen. He's been a cop for over 20 years. Over 20 years. Worst scene he's ever seen. Or one of the worst he's ever seen. Just completely insane. This guy, again, black. No one will talk about it. So the truth of the matter is, if you flip all of these cases, you got a white serial killer in D.C. and New York killing homeless people. You got a white dude that's killing two black people riding their bikes. You'd have riots in the streets right now. You got a white dude going through a Martin Luther King Jr. Day parade where there's tons of black people mowing people down in a SUV. First off, I'm not even sure that guy would have escaped. I think black people would have chased him down and murdered him at his house, and probably rightfully so. Sorry. But this guy, Darrell Brooks, you know, we get to determine whether or not he needs to change venues. The truth of the matter is, this is hurting all of us, and it's going to continue to affect society. We're going to continue to see more crime just because due to this narrative that America is systemically racist, that all cops are racist. It's going to hurt black communities, minority communities the most, and in fact, it already is. You've heard Heather McDonald. You've seen her writings where she has detailed the depolicing, if you will, the Ferguson effect of what's happening in communities where cops are just saying, I don't want to lose my career. I don't want to be called a racist. I don't want to end up like Kim Potter going to jail. I don't want to be like Derek Chauvin, who subdued a crackhead and spending the rest of my life in prison and likely dying in prison. I don't want to do that. I'm backing off. I know we can go back and forth. We'll argue about Derek Chauvin. I think Derek Chauvin made a stupid mistake. Very, 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 very stupid. But he was trained like that, contrary to what's been said in the media. He was trained to subdue people that might experience this, whatever it's called, delirious something or another. I forget the exact name, but when people are high on drugs. He should have made a better decision, a judgment call. There's no doubt about it. Does he deserve to be in jail? In my opinion, probably so. Does he deserve to be in jail for 20 plus years? No, I'm sorry. I personally believe George Floyd was going to die that day. He was on fentanyl. Oh, anyway, this drives me nuts because now I know, as a result of this narrative, that America is systemically racist, that blacks are targeted by police officers, and this Defund the Police movement that the squad continue to promulgate. We're going to see more crime. We're going to see more death. We're going to see more violent death. And whites are going to be the victims of a lot of these violent attacks. So brace yourself. I hope that you live in a state where you're allowed to carry so that you can protect yourself. But guys, listen, I appreciate you listening to this podcast. Kind of an abrupt way to end, but we've got to stop this. We've got to have equal justice under the law. We've got to be willing to fight back against this narrative that America is systemically racist. We got to be willing to know the arguments, share the stats, continue to push back. No, America isn't systemically racist. The vast majority of our cops are good guys doing the right thing or doing the best they can do in the worst of situations. We got to fight back against this narrative because it's only going to lead to more violence. And God knows where this could lead, but it's definitely going to lead to more violence. All right, guys, please be sure to follow me on Facebook, Carl Jackson Radio, Twitter, and Parler at Carl Jackson Show. Getter, Carl Jackson Show, waiting to be approved by True Social. That'll be Carl Jackson Show as well. But also, please, wherever podcasts are found, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, please be sure to subscribe and share. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I look forward to speaking to you next time. And until next time, don't grow weary doing good, and God bless you.